The following is a conversation between me and Nori. Nori wrote an article about struggling with the Zettelkasten method and ultimately abandoning her Zettelkasten. So I thought to contact her and had the reason so at least I could clean some of Nori's issues up without advertising for the Zettelkasten method in itself, but rather cleaning up some of the nicks and knacks of setting up any system. And we ended up to have an awesome conversation, and Nori agreed to making this conversation public. So enjoy and bye bye. So, hello Nori.
Hi.
So for the listeners or for the viewers, we talked a couple of minutes before, so it's an artificial start. So my guess is that, or the first aspect that I think you might have missed about the Zettelkasten method is that the Zettelkasten method is not a container for everything. So it's not that you need to make it a hub of everything that you read and stuff like that, but it's it's the end result of aligning several practices that you should do anyway. So the first practice is note taking, meaning you should like somehow externalize your thinking, um, because it extends your thinking capabilities. Obviously, you don't need to like externalize. I don't know, when you read a cooking recipe or something like that, but when you want to push yourself a little bit, then it's nice to have it external. Also, this is it's kind of like the same effect of like reading extra carefully. So it increases encoding. Or I like the term depth of processing. And then when you increase the depth of processing, then you have not only better recall, but you have more, let's say, more points of access to the same material. So this is why people, or why the claim is justified that the Zettelkasten method makes you more creative. So what does it mean to be creative? Part of the deal is that you see the same stuff in more than one light. So it's kind of like the opposite of the result of card learning, because when you read a card or when you do card learning, you see, let's say, the word, and then you have the different definition on the other side, and now you condition yourself all over again. So when you see the word, you kind of like a dog that like here sit, now you know the definition, and then that's that. So you just have like one point of access trained to this piece of information. But if you process it and like check it from all kinds of angles, which is necessary to integrate it in your Zettelkasten, for example, then you have more than one access point. So let's assume I put uh, um, some communication, let's say, model in dog training in my Zettelkasten. Then I make a connection to raising a child, because both entail communication with non-lingual entities, and then I can make some connections. Now, my Zettelkasten will give me or invites me to explore further, because when you create a structure node, the one thing is to have a point of access to a part of your Zettelkasten. So I have a structure node for child raising, and a structure node for dog training. And now I made one connection, and now the the one structure node becomes a menu, because now my dog is like almost finished in training, let's say, and now I'm more interested, obviously, in child raising, because my children are small enough that I have some influence on them, and that means that my Zettelkasten now asks me, or quote unquote ask me, what can you do from dog training to raise or for raising a child? And one example might be, okay, it's also about independence, because in normal dog training, you want your dog to be as independent, dependent on you in decision making as possible, because 99% of the decisions that a dog makes are awful. So eating poop, chasing rabbits, and all this kind of stuff. And with a child, it's the opposite. You want to, or the goal is almost complete independence from you and from others. So when you want to have obedience, obviously you want to have a degree of obedience in both. In With a dog, you want total obedience, and with a child, you want, let's say, sufficient obedience. But what if the way how you create obedience in the child creates, let's say, obedience to the system? Meaning they will kind of like just take orders and from almost anyone, and they're like hyper obedient because it's kind of like the way how you shape their thinking. This is, or I want to have at least children that are a little bit rebellious against the system, because I think the system is not always in your best interest. So I can't like just make my child obedient and like transport all what I know from doctoring. So coming back to the topic. So when I now learn something about raising a child, or hear something about dog training or something like that, it's not that I need, like, I learned it and now I need to like run to my Zettelkasten and like put it in there just in case or something like that. Um, it's rather that when I think deeply about the issues, I'd like to be in the context of my Zettelkasten, because my Zettelkasten is a stimulating thinking environment. So um, it's not about capturing. It's not, or this is not the interesting part, because the stuff, let's say, that you prepare or that is ripe for processing will always much more than you can that you can process. Because it's just like, if I think to have enough material for processing, I think I need like 15 minutes of reading or something like that, if I choose my sources correctly. So 15 minutes of reading will be enough for me to have a full day of processing for my Zettelkasten. So when I read an hour a day or something like that, or just like here and there, I will amass much more than I can process. And this is also good, because the bottleneck will be the time in which you do deep thinking, because this is the rare time, because deep thinking happens when time, attention, and energy kind of like meets. Because you don't think deeply if you have if you're, for example, if you distract yourself from the boredom of, let's say, like cleaning your house. This is not actually deep thinking. You're kind of like ruminating and do lateral thinking, or something like that. But to really think deep, you need to be like focused on this one thing. And this means you need to have something like sessions or practice. So first thing in the morning for an hour, or last thing in the evening, or like 3 times per day, this, then and that, or Saturday morning when, I don't know, when your children are at soccer practice or whatnot. This is when you can do the deep thinking, and then the Zettelkasten comes into play. Obviously, sometimes you can do like a 20-minute like in between thing, because you think something that's really important and it helps you with your goals and tasks. But this is it's not the major driver of when the Zettelkasten can help you. And what I think, based on what I read, is that you try to be completionist with everything that you or that you kind of like read, and this, I would most likely, it sucks the joy out of the Zettelkasten, because when
It
you
does.
are completionist, then you mix short type work, because you put stuff in your Zettelkasten because you have to, or you feel obligated to. And this dilutes the exciting part, like figuring stuff out and seeing connections, and then being stimulated and having an idea that like really excites you or moves forward what is relevant to you. I would say this might be, or this is my hypothesis, so it's not like that clear cut that I of based on your article, that uh, um, that you didn't narrow down the cell custom work enough to the things that really move you. Um, aha, so
No, no,
yeah, yeah.
I think uh, I have a lot of interests, so
Mhm,
that's an issue. But maybe I don't always go deep on all of them, right? But and I'm a notorious note taker,
mhm,
including now, because yes, it helps me think and focus. So, but you're right that not all of that should go into a Zettelkasten. But it just, I think from a lot of what is being written about Zettelkasten online, you kind of get this feeling like it should contain a lot. So it just feels like it invites to this completionism, which I'm already prone to. So I can totally see that that sort of ruined the fun of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I don't think the problem was that I was including too many things, as in that I didn't narrow it down enough. I think I was just trying to catch too much of the things around the ideas that I felt were interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Things that were obvious to me. I was probably writing as if taking nothing as given, right?
Mm-hmm.
Taking too much context because some of the context is obvious, or at least obvious to me, and there's very low likelihood that I will forget it unless I get a stroke or something.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't really necessary to put it all down, but I was doing that, right? So it was a bit too much of writing things that were uh, clear to me and
Mm-hmm.
obvious to me. So I mean that is a very you're right that I did do that wrong. Um, yeah, I would I would have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
What what is a Zettelkasten? Because like, because people talk about the principles, right? That atomicity, linking, and deep processing would be some of them, right? Um, because I'm like, how much of it can you take away for it to still be a Zettelkasten? Because let's say that everything you write is processed, as in you assimilated the knowledge, um, and you're linking here and there, but it's not heavily linked, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I always had those two are fine, but I always had a problem with atomic notes.
Mm-hmm.
Like the moment I start doing atomic notes, I feel like it fractures too much. Like I don't feel like it holds the connections that well. Like I can't see them. I'm fairly and I'm not that visual, but I like overview
Mm-hmm.
and I like and I'm very high in openness to experience.
Mm-hmm.
So the physicality of paper and sort of the topography of the layouts on a page, it's it tickles my brain in the right way. So it helps me think, it helps me remember things. And the moment I break things down into these tiny chunks,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it like my thoughts just fracture.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can't put it together again. And that's just one of the things that kept happening no matter what I tried to do with the Zettelkasten. So I'm just kind of wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
So the question is, so how short uh, did your notes become?
Well, sometimes it felt like it was basically just the title of the note.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So,
And and I could write more about it. Of course I could, but it just felt unnecessary.
yeah.
I would often write something, right? And there was probably a reference or something, but it just felt like I would be just writing the obvious.
Mhm. So I think this is there. There might be two sources of this of these hyper short notes that I don't think are that are helpful. So the one source is mostly let's say demonstrations for the sake of demonstration, meaning like some influencer like discovered the Zettelkasten method, and then or the incentive is to be enthusiastic because it's a new thing, and this means new content, and then there's yet another video article or whatnot on the Zettelkasten method, and then you have um, obviously example notes, and then these nodes are short because it's just like one sentence, just to have some content on the node. The other source, might be Luhmann himself, because when you look at the so-called literature nodes, bibliographical nodes, or however they are called, it's just one sentence most of the time. So how does a proper node emerge from this one sentence? Then you look into Luhmann's own Zettelkasten, and then you see there's one sentence or two per node. And I view, for example, so, yeah, and this also like pushes you into the direction. Okay, perhaps you need to like really atomic to make it happen, because it's all about these atomic nodes and stuff like that. And I personally would give Luhmann, the Godfather himself, for his node, let's say a D minus, because they are really, really underdeveloped. But for how Luhmann worked, they are perfect. Because Luhmann needed to solve a very different problem that we need to solve today. Meaning, Luhmann didn't have any electronics or something like that. So to actually, because when you write a scientific article, part of the game is to have a lot of footnotes, because then it looks fancy enough so you can get published. So this is one of the sad truths, especially in humanities, where Luhmann was a professor in. So how do you get there? So to have a footnote in the text, Luhmann had to physically go to the library, then search in huge cupboards, like in physical magazines, and then read this, or read or go to the history, and then go to the archive and read like an ancient letter of some noble, and then like read it, and hopefully there was some connection to his work. So what Luhmann did actually was he had a knowledge work practice. That means he went to university and he read like all kinds of different things, obviously guided by his work interest, and it was not just random. While he read, he made this very short notes, and they had to be short, so he couldn't like do highlights a lot, because it was many of the books weren't his own, and so he was there, but he was not interested in like actually extracting out the ideas. It was more about being stimulated. And then he went with his very brief notes, and it was like capturing them and processing them on the same day. That means in the evening, he just extended the shorthand idea, and briefly, and so they became complete sentences basically. And then he stuffed his Zettelkasten with this. So when he then used his Zettelkasten for his writing, he basically had already an idea what he will write, because he knew stuff like inside out as a workaholic. So he had a big outline, and then he looked into his Zettelkasten and tried to enrich the outline with the ideas and stuff. And with this enrichment, the footnotes came, because he had all these kind of like references. So he solved the problem of the footnote to make his text fancy enough to be published. And also, he used it more as a creative tool, and not so much of like actually extracting out what's in there, which shows in his article Communications with Zettelkastens, because he talks about communication and being surprised by each other and stuff like that. So it was not about extracting, it was more a creative tool that stimulated him, so he could enrich his outline of a text that he already knew, because he knew what he wanted to say in the beginning. Obviously, in the practice, it doesn't turn out like cleanly. So sometimes he will rewrite his outline, or restructure it, or rewrite this and that. So it's not that clear, but this is the basic thing of it. So this pushes you into this strange idea of atomicity. I mean, strange because it's not based on any criteria other than it has to be short. So what I instead introduced, let's say in my incarnation of the Zettelkasten method, is I want to have like proper criteria for atomicity. And the proper criteria are, you need to capture the idea, and the idea, and you can capture the idea if you know what type of idea you capture. So for example, if you capture an argument, you need three things, and three things only. the premises, the conclusion, and the logical form. Then you captured the total argument. So this gives you a pretty clear idea when a node is atomic or not. So it gives you a better frame of reference, and this is also why I would give Luhmann a D-, because I don't think claims are like proper developed ideas, because a claim is just it's just a spit out statement, like a single statement. So there's no reasoning, there's no effort, no nothing. So if you, for example, let's say, what would be a typical thing? So a claim would be, yeah, a very atomic node is principles. Principles are seem to be primary, but most likely they are just observations of what you are already doing and post hoc explanations, something like that. So this is not a node. It's not an atomic node that will help you, because the only thing that you did was capturing it. So you had the idea, either being inspired by a source, or you just copy and paste from the source, or you had it on the own. So this is the extent of the work. So putting it into the Zettelkasten is not that interesting. Relating this to other ideas might be interesting, but then you need to follow through. So you need to write about the implications and the new ideas and stuff like that. But this capturing doesn't do anything for you, because it's not even that you have a lot of rewriting to be done. So there's no like processing through, putting it in your own words. It's kind of like shuffling words around just for the sake of it, if you want to put it in your quote unquote own words. So what will happen on the same node is the actual reasoning. So what are the implications? What is there empirical evidence for it? Are there arguments or counter arguments? How could you model it? So can you like tease out the inner workings, how it actually, how the mechanics of behind these principles are, or the statement or whatnot. And this should be all on the same node. And when you think a lot, meaning you wrote a lot, and the tzedka or the node becomes really clunky, that you have the feeling, okay, this is just like too much and it's too, then you break up the node, because then you have good reason to break up the node. So I would call this the reverse workflow, or the reverse basic workflow, meaning I will tell you the basic workflow in a second. Because you start with a node, then you let it grow. So you think and through writing, and then you break it apart, because you can only break it apart when you understand the matter good enough to actually see the distinction between the individual ideas and thoughts. So the basic workflow is you start from a link. So it's not, it depends on how you work. So it's not that you use this or that more often, but you create a link, and then you create the node from the link. So in Obsidian, you just like do the double brackets, have your title, and then you click, and then you start writing the node to make sure that the node has always at least one link pointing to it, so it's embedded into the network. So what is a Zettelkasten? So the Zettelkasten is a thinking environment based on your externalized thinking, or that use the externalized thinking to make past thinking efforts available. So this would be, or is my current work definition of the Zettelkasten. So is a Zettelkasten still a Zettelkasten if you don't have atomicity or don't have a gazillion links or whatnot? I'd say yes, as long as you create some form of hypertext. Most of the principles, atomicity, or I'm very, I think like value adding or value adding work is kind of like central. So I have my own like little, not theory, it's still just an inventory of what knowledge is actually, or what the value properties of knowledge are compared to information. So for example, reliability. So the more reliable something is, the more valuable it is. And also, so to give you the complete picture, it's about reliability, relevance, usefulness, beauty, and simpleness. So these are the core value, or the core traits that give knowledge value over information. So information is just like stuff. So these are the claims and so on and so forth. And knowledge emerges when you like just add value. And they somehow interact with each other. So I give you one example, but I can only give you like very few because it's not a fully developed, let's say, model or theory about what the nature of knowledge work is. It's just an inventory and kind of like works in the practice. So let's assume I say to you, I don't know, like carbides are really, really bad for you, and it will like mess you up because insulin or something like this. So this is just like a statement. It's not very interesting because some guy in the world like said something. But if I now provide you a lot of arguments and empirical evidence, and therefore increase the reliability of this piece of information to an extent that you now are really convinced this is how reality works. Now you feel some pressure to act upon it because we have the instinct to base our actions on a solid foundation of truth. So there is some connection between the value of reliability and the value of, let's say, utility or usefulness. So there's some transfer from the is to the should or to the ought. So like it's a little bit acquainted with the natural fallacy. So I think the natural fallacy is in itself not so clear cut. So for the ones who don't know the natural fallacy, it's you infer the should from the is. So for example, animals kill each other in the nature, so we should kill each other also. This would be a normal or a typical natural fallacy. So I think this is a very or it's one way of making you more active. And I think it's a good way because it directs you to the actual value properties of knowledge. So you can play a lot of it. So for example, when you think about the relevancy, um, it's fine. When you think about the relevancy of something, you can make it really specific. It's relevant to you or a specific person, or you can make the statement, this is relevant to all people. So when you make or you can confirm the claim that it's relevant to all people, then you transformed the claim from a personal claim to a claim about the human condition, for example. So scope or a scope is something that can be also manipulated or played with, for example. And when you kind of like know the basic actions of knowledge, so increasing reliability, or for example, when you want to disprove something, it's different than strengthening another position. So this is, for example, why people argue and don't come to a conclusion, because one person argues for position A and the other person argues for position B. But what you actually have to do also is to provide counter arguments for the arguments of position A if you are in position B. So, quote unquote, attacking the other arguments is actually the way how you actually utilize empathy. Because like just arguing for different positions is like increasing stuff in isolated silos. You need to let the arguments and yourself like crash into each other. And this is also why people feel like so misunderstood and stuff like that. Part of the reason, not all of the reason, obviously. So arguments and counter arguments are how the truth flows from statement to statement. So knowing how to make arguments or formal arguments and provide counter arguments and stuff like that is how to control the flow of truth. So this is why I think the value properties are actually kind of on their own in their own or have a special place in the activation techniques. But the knowledge compass or the idea compass is also some creative techniques. Means you have a set of questions and you ask yourself, okay, north is where did the idea come from? Where did it originate? And south would be, okay, what are the implications, for example? And then you have what is similar or what is opposite and stuff like that. This would be also activation. But it's not that if you don't operate with these tools that you don't have a Zettelkasten. So what is actually then in the core of the Zettelkasten method? The core is this connection to being a thinking environment. So having your past thinking efforts available to you, and the rest are principles. Let's say best something like best principles, because having atomic notes enables a lot of stuff. So if you are clear on the boundaries of ideas, then you have a good grasp on the essence of the idea. It's not kind of like muddled. It's very similar to software engineering, for example. So you don't want to have like a lot of different like tasks and responsibilities like munched together in one object or something like that. But you want to separate everything so cleanly, so everything has its own purpose. So it unlocks this and also makes linking much more meaningful, because then you can, if you have like two ideas on each one of one node, the connection of the nodes will be actually a connection of the ideas. And if you have a bunch of ideas on this one node and a bunch of ideas on this one node, and you make a connection, it's much more blurry. So, but it still works. You can do it, but then it's also you need to clean it up, like very similar to software engineering. So you can still make it work, but then when you divide this and divide this, then you need to like clean up also the connection and stuff. But it's not maintenance work that you do then in your Zettelkasten, because it's identical to the deepening of the understanding of the matter that's reflected in the external thinking environment, or on the thinking canvas. So obviously, it's a little bit harder than just like doing it in your own head, because you have to type and invest, like sit in front of your computer. But it also enables a lot because you have your thinking externalized and therefore amplified through the externalized thinking effect.
Okay, yeah, that does make sense. But how long are your notes usually?
They range from one sentence to approximately 500 words, I think. So
Okay.
I don't mind. So yes, sometimes I have a research note, for example, meaning it's guided by a question, and it's not atomic at all, because atomicity is kind of like the end result. When I have
Mm.
stuff out, then I can make it atomic. Now I can't do so I can extract out some notes, and sometimes I just push it, I postpone it, because I still want to have everything just in one document, because then it's easier to just like shuffle the content around and like scroll back and forth. It's having it on one note makes it easier to have this thinking canvas going. Yeah, so this would be a very long note. But I mean, the principle of atomicity can already, or if you like stretch the metaphor a little bit. So if you have atomic notes, you don't know if you process a hydrogen or a plutonium. And obviously, a hydrogen is much smaller than a plutonium. So a node can be small or big depending on the scope of the idea.
Yeah. I have another
Mhm.
question. No, I forgot it. Just a moment. What do you do? Because you said that, a note should be like if it's an argument, then you have all the bits in it. What do you do with the raw information that you're coming across? And you're like, okay, I should remember this because it ties in with some other things, right?
Mhm.
And do you just sort of have that in some separate inbox? Because sometimes, like, let's say that you have a note about, carbohydrates are bad for you, and you find an example,
Mhm.
you find the study, or you find an explanation of some processes. I don't know, the effect of fructose on liver or whatever, right? You find something, and you're like, okay, that ties in. But the thing on its own is not like it's just an example, or it's just something like, where do you put that? Like, because I feel like when I'm reading,
Mhm.
I'm not processing it yet, but I want those notes to be captured somewhere.
Why?
That's a good question. So that I can think about them later.
Mhm. So the answer to that is embedded in your answer. So it should be added to the thinking canvas that you have created for that matter. So, for example, when I have a note, let's say I have this note about carbohydrates. So before anybody kind of like butchers me, no, carbohydrates are not killing you. It like all depends. It like always in nutrition, but um, uh, most likely it would be guided by either me trying to figure out how the, let's say, ketogenic or low carbohydrate works, and therefore this will be my point of entry. So I have, let's say, I read a study, and the study kind of like confirms that a certain amount of carbohydrates like overflows your liver. So there's a certain boundary, and now I just add the specific type of information to the node that can need it. So, for example, if I make the statement carbohydrate is killing you, then I would have just one line, and the upper boundaries or the daily upper boundary of carbohydrate is this. So don't eat more than this amount of carbohydrates on a day, and then at least you avoid this type of damage. Footnote, and then this is that. And this is also how the Zettelkasten, or in the Zettelkasten, if you read a lot about similar topics, especially if you are doing or doing research on if there's enough evidence for some position. So if I read another study that says basically the same thing, or I extract out the same conclusion, I just add the footnote. So sometimes, yeah, then I have a note, and then I have like 6 footnotes just for this one statement, for example. If I now read the seventh study on that, and there's nothing new other than this confirmation, I just add the footnote because I want to have it there. For me personally, it's just about uh, um, this the same problem as Lumen had. I want to have in part a lot of footnotes because it just adds reliability, and obviously I don't want to add just like a bunch of footnotes with never having read it. So it adds authority to the text for both good and bad reasons, and also it highlights that I have read this paper within this context. So when I stumble upon it, or if I rediscover the paper and forgot that I read it, then it's there, and I have confirmation that I also read it.
Yeah. I have a feeling that from how you're describing the Zettels,
Mhm.
they, I think many people would probably call them more as mini essays than notes.
Um, yeah, it might be because yeah, I think the or it's I saw so many examples of this problem of having these super brief notes. And the problem that I see is the justification for those super brief notes is not or it's almost non-existent. It's very indirect. It's why are the notes so brief? Because they should be atomic. And then you would ask, okay, what's the atom then? And then there's nothing. It reminds me a little bit of when I was a trainer in a big commercial gym. And when you would ask, when you would ask, oh no, I'm shitting a little bit on the other trainers. So to give you a little bit more context, many trainers are just like students that work part-time there to finance the study. So low pay, low motivation, low everything, and it's kind of like the part of the deal. If you want to have like low prices in your gym, then trainers are paid like low wages and have low motivation, but also low skills and low knowledge. And if you would then, on many, like parade the dogma of never bending your knee further than 90 degrees. So you do a squat, not lower than 90 degrees and stuff like that. And when you would ask why, they would say it's bad for the knees. But the problem is this is circular thinking because it's kind of like based off the reasoning. Or the claim is don't bend your knees further than 90 degrees because it's bad for the knee would be the complete claim. And when you ask why, and you just repeat the part of the claim, then it's circular thinking. And when you would ask, okay, but how, or something like that, then there came nothing. So I'm not trying to shit now on the trainers because it's kind of like you are more like an assembly line worker when you work in a big commercial gym. And my position there was different, let's say, because I did also in the same way, but also used it as a practice. So it's not me shitting on my colleagues back then. But in the Zettelkasten world, there is a similar phenomenon with when it comes to atomicity. It's okay, why atomic nodes? Because this is how Zettelkasten works. Yeah, but then what is an atom? But you never hear about what an atom actually is. And it's always very like cloudy definitions, almost like this kind of like trifecta of data, information, and knowledge. So what data is like pretty clear. Information becomes a little bit more blurry. Knowledge becomes more blurry. And what's the difference between information and knowledge? Then it's all like metaphysical stuff that is very impractical. So you can read like a lot about this trifecta and learn very, very little. And atomicity suffers from the same thing. And this is why I am in my explanation formal. So I use the example of the argument consciously because an argument is like a formal argument is pretty straightforward. In practice, my notes are in the majority not developed to a point in which everything is like very clear. Because I don't have the time, and I don't, or many notes don't are not worth the commitment. Only when it really helps, then I'm hyper clear. But I I push the note to a point in which I know what I will do next, because it's a lesson that I think everybody already learned. So sometimes you take a note, and then even after a week you don't know what you have written. And for me, it was kind of a lot. Sometimes I wrote 2 pages, and then I was like baffled what I wanted to say in these 2 pages. Sometimes I was inspired to another thing, but I didn't like recapture the idea that I put on the note. So the problem of that is that you assume that you have the same context available in the future that you don't have. You don't have the same inspiration, the same excitement about the idea, not the same let's say other ideas that you have then in your work memory and stuff like that. So when you use your Zettelkasten like this, then you will have the feeling that you create a lot of mess. And then you revisit the note, you can like properly understand them, and you have to do a lot of editing to like decipher and reconstruct what you wanted to say and stuff like that. Then it's a lot of work. So I make it a rule to write a note and edit it to a point in which I know what I would do next with it if I would commit to the idea fully. So when I write down an argument, I know from the tell signs with like words like therefore and based on the premise or something like that. I know that this is an argument, and I know how to formalize arguments reasonably well. And therefore, when I write it down, I'm sure that when I stumble upon the note and I have edited carefully, that I perfectly know what to do next with it. Sometimes I even don't need to formalize it because the argument is not formal but explicit enough, so I know what the premises are, the logical form, and I mean there are no complicated arguments. It's always just like modus ponens, like the very basics. So if you want to learn or formal logic, the syllogisms and the collection of syllogisms is enough for 99% of the formal problems of arguments. But yeah, that means oh, I forgot the starting point of me talking. What was the question? It was
We were,
atomicity. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. So this is yeah. I start with this formal stuff, and when you know like enough, or when you have enough practice, then you can go back and take notes more by intuition, because then then you have confidence that your future self will be able to use the notes properly. Instead of, at least this was my major problem. I just like rambled a lot, and then it was like a whole lot more work to actually understand what I wrote back then. And this was like very unsettling for me because it slowed down my work, and therefore I put up or put the work up front, and therefore had my again, it connects back to the definition. I had my past thinking efforts actually available to me with no surplus work, and then I could build upon my past work instead of my past work being an extra burden now that I have to take care of.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I never had problem in the Zettelkasten with not knowing what I meant or like that I
Mm,
would
yeah,
not
yeah.
understand. Um, but that was, but from what you're saying, I have a feeling that your workflow does not translate very well to paper because it seems like you would do a lot of rearranging within the notes.
Yeah. So when I had my paper at Zettelkasten, so I did actually, I don't know for how long, and then I switched also to one of the original gangsters of the Zettelkasten software, ZKN3, um, by Daniel Lüdecke. Big shout out to Daniel Lüdecke. And it also had the Folgezettel thing embedded into it. Um, I worked differently there. But yeah, when I fully switched to digital and also got rid of, let's say, the rigidity, because the Folgezettel, for example, also introduced a lot of rigidity. Um, I could actually go to or come to a point that I like to reach with everybody, because what happens on the screen should be almost as changing the gear. So I like, or the most optimal state would be you just think, and your fingers just move along with your thinking, and everything just like kind of like happens. I mean, it's or the science fiction version of that is the scene in Minority Report where they are kind of like move stuff in the air and this and that, and then it's just like very like haptical and physical, but also you can manipulate everything like with very minimal interactions. And this would be the optimal state. And this is also how or where I direct my tries to set up the system. I want everything to be very direct, and with no like method, like having being a layer between your thinking and whatever is in the screen. So I don't like big headers or big like front matter with all kinds of classification of the node and stuff like that. It's too much upfront work. I want to just like
Mm.
think. So when you see me working my Zettelkasten, it's just a lot of writing and like going back and forth. So this entails a little bit of training. So I have like the area of my Zettelkasten that I'm working in is mostly uploaded in my working memory. Not exactly, obviously, because the working memory is too small, mine also, but I basically then it's a very familiar place, my Zettelkasten, and also the area that I'm working, and therefore I just have most, because people ask me how do you find those unexpected connections and stuff. It's just I have them, but it's not that I have them because I have a super brain or something like that. It's just like it's a very familiar place. I worked with the nodes for quite some time, so it's kind of like a given that I when I enter a new node or create enter a new idea, that I know, okay, this reminds me of that, and then I see another node, and then it's kind of just there. So it's much more fluid, I would say, and much more messy, I would say, because atomicity is more the end result and not so much the starting point that you can get there.
Yeah, it sounds a lot messier than I imagined imagined it. Um, yeah, I had the same experience that I would I was not running in, I mean, I only had around 500 notes at the max of my Zettelkasten, but the any connection appeared first in my head and I just looked for it, right? But now I can see that my notes were too small. They were too atomic, I
Mm.
guess. Um, yeah. But you have a big Zettelkasten, right? I
Kind
mean,
of
you have many notes, if I remember correctly.
2,800 notes or something like that. But I'm doing this
Oh,
for 13,700 notes.
Yeah, that's a lot. Um,
I'm doing this for 15 years, and I never switched Zettelkastens or restarted or something like that. I just have my Zettelkasten now for 15 years.
how do you, I mean, because I found it a bit overwhelming,
Mhm.
even with just 500 notes, that I would find that there were notes that especially when I wrote digital, like
Mhm.
paper was different because it was a bit more real to me and I wasn't forgetting them as easily. But on with digital, I found myself running into notes that I wrote before and I doubled up,
Mhm.
that I actually kind of run into the same idea, the same thing, but expressed very differently from maybe slightly different angle. And it ended up as two different notes that I wasn't aware of them until later. I randomly ran into it. And then it just felt like it felt a bit, it was redundant and it was extra work now trying to merge things.
Mhm.
And I was kind of annoyed that the fact that I did not find it. I mean, because the keywords were sort of different because it was expressed too differently
Yeah,
for
yeah.
search to find it. But it was kind of the same idea. It was too related. And I'm like, and that was just 500 notes. I can't imagine with 10,000. And I'm like, I guess I should start accepting a bit more mess. But I'm guessing that that's what you do, right? You're like, okay, that part of the Zettelkasten is sort of dead and old. Or do you try to sort of keep things in good shape?
Where I work, I hopefully leave it in good shape, and then so what would be a good example? So, for example, the topic of psychological entropy. Psychological entropy will play a huge role in my writings when I return to writing about let's say the modern life. So now I'm focusing on Zettelkasten, plainly just because of the money, and I have a family, and writing about like philosophical intricacies of the extension layer doesn't pay a lot yet. But uh, sometimes I have like a couple of ideas that I enter or integrate, but I don't commit to them too much. So over time, this lack of care will show, and the node, or let's say, yeah, the area of psychological entropy will become more and more messy. And when I then refocus on that area, I will do like a lot of cleaning up. And because I will kind of like clean up also my understanding and my overview. And in the meantime, I just let it rot. But the the problem of having of entering the same idea multiple times without being aware, I think comes um, when you are not when you don't have a hole available. So not a hole like a hole that you dig, but like a hole that is compromised of parts. So for example, when I do an entry, let's say the basic protocol of training, which is kind of like my working title for my own, let's say, approach on general training for longevity, health, fitness, this kind of direction. So let's assume I learn about a new like interval training protocol. I have two, three entry points for that. So I have the endurance node for the basic protocol. I have a node on endurance training, and I have a specific node on interval training. So when I check those three nodes, and it's not that the three nodes are indexes or something like that. Those three nodes are my structured representation of this area of my Zettelkasten, which is the externalization of my understanding of this matter. So when I checked those three nodes, I'm pretty confident that I have a good grasp if had this idea already or not. So um, I don't have the problem because only work in my Zettelkasten where I'm reasonably familiar and I also have representations of the wholes. So I think this is one of the let's say perhaps difficulties to understand what structure nodes actually how they work, because you don't index what you have in your Zettelkasten, or you don't create just like an index. In part, I think it's my fault because I pushed this like shape of having a table of content a little bit too much. I mean, the table of content form of a structure node is I think the most practical, because it gives you like a rough idea of like hierarchical relationships, and it's like reasonably dynamic. But a structure node is not just access, or it's not a table of content, but it's rather your try to model the whole that you're working on. So, for example, for me, the basic, let's say the endurance node in the basic protocol is my best understanding of how to shape this whole of this theory of endurance, or this model of endurance that I'm developing. So I mean, it's not very like exotically structured, because in the beginning there are basic concepts, and then there are training methods, and like integration, like or ideas on integration into a bigger picture, and stuff like that. But the let's say the mundaneness of the structure comes from the mundaneness of the problem of creating such a whole, because a model of endurance training was developed, or models of endurance training was developed like a gazillion times by a gazillion trainers, and therefore like basic shapes emerged, because you need to kind of like know the basic concepts, even if you like deviate from it. So I deviate from the classical view on endurance training like quite a bit, but I still have a basic idea on what endurance actually entails and how it functions. So I have a model of endurance. So this is in the beginning, like basic concepts of endurance. Even though it might deviate, the basic shape of this complete model of endurance is like very mundane, very normal. And therefore the structure is not interesting. It's not interesting that I put basic concepts in the beginning, methods in the middle, and in between, like physiological models as a wedge in to make the translation from the theory to the practical. But yeah, this is how you kind of avoid it. And this it also ties back to uh, um, um, thinking in your Zettelkasten when it actually matters. Because when it actually matters, then you think about what matters to you. And it's when you have a lot of like when you spread yourself out thin, then obviously the depth is not that high. That means your brain is not trained on each department. And I mean, like 30,000 and something notes sound a lot, but you don't have let's, or what was a book that moved you in your 20s? Or you can also make
Mm.
something up if you don't. Um,
Okay. No, I have a more recent one. Piranesi. Have you read that one? Great novel. Really
oh,
nice.
I don't have time for novels. I have little children, but um,
I know I haven't read much lately either, but
then
this one I did.
okay, then I will. I mean, it's not surprising that you know the plot of the novel that you read in your 20s if it moved you, for example. So it's not surprising for me that I know, for example, that in August 2013, I read a study by, I don't know how to pronounce the name, Chakravarti, on the feast-famine cycle, for example. But I know this not because I have a super brain or something like that. I just know it because of the way how I engaged with this study. Because back then I wanted to write a book on nutrition, because I thought the paleo diet was it was sound, but it was well argued for, and I thought, yeah, I have all the philosophical skills, so I make proper arguments and repackage the same stuff, but a little bit more clean. This was my goal. And then I read this study, for example, in the scope, and I know it because it kind of like moved me. It was very clear cut. It was interesting because it coupled eating with rest and movement with hunger, which was back then the kind of the opposite of the mainstream, because you kind of when you move a lot, you eat a lot, and when you don't move, you eat less. And this like put or like reverse this coupling, and with good reasonings. And this is just the reason why I know it, for example, like just from the top of my head. And I don't have, yeah, I can't it's no, it's very, very rare. Now it happens, I think it happens now, like for the last 2 years, it happens that I'm kind of like surprised sometimes by notes. And it happens mostly because I don't have a lot of time to actually like work intensively with my Zettelkasten, because now I just write articles for the Zettelkasten, I do coaching, so I have just a lot of work. And back then I worked sometimes up to 30 hours per week in my Zettelkasten. So obviously I'm very trained on my Zettelkasten, and this is the reason why I can just remember it. And the reason, so I didn't spread myself thin, but I had the proper depth, or the high depth of processing, and that means I don't forget it as easy. The same with riding your bike, because when you learn to ride a bike, it's a very deep aha moment when you actually have the balance. And this, like, it reconfigures a lot in your brain, and therefore it makes it very hard to forget how to ride a bike. And the same is with the Zettelkasten. Obviously, the big aha moments are never forgotten, but if you invest enough time into a topic, you also won't forget like a lot of it. So 30, it sounds a lot on surface, but to me, my Zettelkasten doesn't feel that large because everything is
Mm.
kind of familiar.
But from what you're saying, I'm getting a feeling that for most people, a Zettelkasten is a massive overkill
Um,
because the depth of processing that it requires, it's like I don't know, but like I have a full-time job, an extra job, two small kids. It's like I don't have that many hours to spend on these things. And when I'm reading, it's almost like I do want to remember things and I do want to think deeply about them. But it's like there's usually not enough time. Uh, but
so
it's almost like,
yeah,
hmm?
let me jump in. So you have to make a choice. You have to make a choice between breadth and depth, and the intensity of the choice is dependent on time available. So when let's say you have 4 or 5 hours per week for at your disposal for, let's say, just let's assume just hobbies. If you then read, let's say you like plants, you read about plants, then you also read about or you attend a pottery class and learn techniques there. And let's say you have like 1 hour slots, and everything is kind of like different. Then obviously you don't go into depth with any of them. So coming back to the definition of the Zettelkasten method. So the Zettelkasten method is a thinking environment that makes past thinking efforts available. So if your past thinking efforts are not relevant for your present efforts, then you don't need a thinking environment. At least not in the form of the Zettelkasten. You can still use the Zettelkasten in a more, let's say, I don't want to say primitive, but in a more like basic way. So you can still create structure nodes and be orderly with them and use them as your entry points, and therefore make it easier to find stuff. Because still the Zettelkasten will then give you an overview of what you have in there, and then you just need to be a little bit deliberate and meticulous about entering a node or connecting a node from the various important structure nodes that you have. And then your structure node will be more like an index or a table of content, and so on and so forth. But the Zettelkasten method, it shouldn't add anything to your schedule. you just move what you're already doing from the outside into the Zettelkasten. And when you don't have like something outside of the Zettelkasten method that resembles like a deep thinking practice, then the Zettelkasten indeed is or can be an overkill. Unless you want to like have a repository. It still works as like reasonably as a repository, but yeah, I would argue then that if you don't have a deep thinking practice, I guess you are missing something. And this something is very similar to physical training. Because I think in physical training, or in physical training, you have kind of like the everyday movement. So you aren't perfectly healthy if you like go to your CrossFit class and then sit on the couch the rest of the day. So you have your let's say your everyday activity, and then you have your training, and both are important for, let's say, for the training regimen in your life, or the movement in your life. And in with thinking, it's very similar. You have, let's say, the daily activities of thinking, and I would count all, let's say, not shallow like in a judging way, but kind of like in the breadth depth dichotomy. So it's reading, listening to podcasts, debating, and stuff like that. Now, debating would be perhaps a little bit more deep, but yeah, you get the point. It's kind of like the everyday activity of your mind. And then you would having that, you will still miss the benefits of thinking about something with intense concentration, deliberately, like having like just your whole being focused on this one thing. So if you can't make use of the Zettelkasten, so perhaps I'm biased because of my Zettelkasten zealousy, but if you can't use your Zettelkasten, it might be that you lack a deep thinking practice that you would benefit from. And I mean, for like I do a lot of knowledge work, meaning I have to figure stuff out a lot. Therefore, I'm using my Zettelkasten a lot. But and if you don't have it a lot, then you don't use the Zettelkasten a lot, and which is also fine. But I think some deep thinking practice is very beneficial. And then obviously it depends also how you work. So for example, I have um, one client, or not one, past attendee to the Zettelkasten introduction course, who works as a chemical engineer I think she translates chemical stuff to the marketing team, and vice versa. And she uses for work, but also for let's say more existential, like human condition stuff, like self-help and all this kind of stuff. So she does part of her work now in her Zettelkasten, just writing notes about pH analysis methods for like oils and I don't know what, and also like committing, or when she wants to go deep into a topic or a book or something like that, then she uses also her Zettelkasten for that. And yeah, so I tried to get I wanted to get at so it depends how you set up your week or your schedule, and then allocate points in time in which you have your full attention on a matter. This is where you can use the Zettelkasten the most, or where you unlock the magic, let's say, and the non-magical stuff also is valuable, having overview and having stuff that you can then pull out. But yeah, or the Zettelkasten then is not that life-changing, but then it's rather like a good enough system to store stuff.
Yeah, because I'm thinking that there are two needs that writing and note taking usually fulfill, at least for me. The first one is taking notes, as in copying some, or not copying, but like taking notes from some other source with probably like little other processing than just picking out what you note down or what I note down, with the intention to either remember some of it
Mhm.
because it might be useful, either to like usually to apply to my life or someone else's or share or whatever, or because I want to think about it later, right? So there's this gathering, what usually people think about as note taking. And then there's the thinking. I like to do the thinking on paper with pen and paper. I feel like I think better. So, but from what you're saying, that first part should probably not really be in a Zettelkasten. Because what I used to do is that I would take notes from whatever I was reading, and I felt like, okay, this is something that I want to capture for various reasons. And then I would feel obligated to go through this inbox and turn the ideas into atomic notes, which were usually very short because they were right from the source, right? So it would be basically rewriting the book that I was reading if I were to write it properly, which is useless, right? But at the same time, I couldn't and didn't have to and didn't want to sort of think deeply about every single thing, every single idea. Some of them were just to be kind of kept for future use. But from your perspective, that does not really belong to a Zettelkasten, or it goes into a note that is like a work in progress where it can be dumped and maybe worked with later, right?
Yeah, it depends on how your life is set up. So I'm basically sitting all day in front of the computer. So when I have those like those kind of let's say just stuff, it's for me it's easy to enter it in my Zettelkasten. So I just like I make sure that I don't create too much mess. So the Zettelkasten is still functional, and I don't have like a node that contains like 20 quotes or something like that. But uh, um, yeah, for me it would be easy. But the problem is when you have to separate taking note because you are on in the bus, walking with your dog or wherever, or like reading on the sofa and don't want to like run to the computer whenever you find something useful, um, and the actual Zettelkasten work. And then yes, so then you can basically ignore most of the note taking because you need to, or the Zettelkasten only makes sense when you want to commit to the idea. So you need to have like some filtering when which idea you want to commit and when not. And just like the idea is might be interesting or something like that, this is not very promising. It's also not how motivation works. Because when the reward or the promise of reward is like really low, then you run out of motivation like pretty quickly, and then it feels like off. So then you question, why am I doing this? And then you get into this downward spiral of motivation, and then more or less, or sooner or later, you will stop your behavior. So actually, that you did use your Zettelkasten for 2 years is actually like a testament of um, like grit, I would say, because you did like for so long and tried to make it work. And I would say this grit stem from the need of depth. Um, so when you characterize yourself being high in openness, so do you have did you made a test, the Big Five test? So how high
Yeah.
was it?
96 or
Ah,
98%.
yeah, okay. So then it's when you are in that high of a percentile, then it's or this is what I observe from my coaching. So people when that I are very high in openness, um, both or in the both categories. So I, for example, so strangely, I'm very not very low or very low in openness to experience, by the way, which is kind of interesting because it's kind of like said that openness to experience is creativity, and I would let's say claim that I'm a creative person, but I think it just for me personally it comes I don't like, for example, lyrics or like all kinds of like arts, but I'm very narrow in my in my, let's say, creative endeavor. But I'm uh, exceptionally high in intellect, meaning just interest in abstract ideas. So for the listeners, it's not that I'm not it's not high in IQ. It's just having this like nerdy side, let's say. So when you have that, one of those two traits, um, exposure to novel experiences, ideas, thinking, depending obviously on your interest, is a reward in itself. So just the mere
Mm.
exposure gives you a reward. So that means that you are easily distracted by the new and the novel. And what what or this creates a yearning for depth, not for all people. So there are a lot of, and it's not the criticism, there are a lot of people that don't need depth at all. Like from the let's say from the need. So they are fine with just like doing this, doing that. So I have a friend who's a trainer, and he witnessed somebody like visiting his workshops, and he does a lot of like very like dancing and like freeform movement and like very it's a very high variety of movement stuff. And the one person didn't really listen. He was just there and was moving. And first he was annoyed because he thought, okay, he's not like very he's not obedient enough and something like that. And he thought, no, he just wanted to be part of this thing, and he was like happy and didn't disturb anybody. And this was is the perfect description of somebody who um, is very high in openness, like wants to be like experience a lot, but has no desire for depth. So there's no analysis, no trying to improve, no nothing. It's just being there and it's fine. But if you don't have, let's say, the blessing of lack of need for depth, then you have a problem when you are high in openness, because the highness in openness, like it pulls you into the breadth, and then it leaves out the depth, and it's more of an effort to like get there. So if you have that, then you have a need, and this needs to be fulfilled. Some on perhaps not need, but you will be better off if you manage a schedule in which you have a little bit of this depth. So I, for example, I mean, I have a similar problem because I have this high interest in abstract things, and I just like to consume information. And back then, so or before I had my Zettelkasten, my identity was tied to the number of books that I read. So I bragged about like reading a couple of books in this short amount of time, and this and that. Not that I bragged actually, but internally, I was very prideful of my high book consumption. And when I started to use my Zettelkasten, and I saw that I couldn't read that much or and process. And I saw the value of processing because it like vastly increased the mastery of the material and the depth. I struggled quite a lot, and I needed to make peace that reading was not that productive that I thought it is. So my personal solution is, to the best of my abilities, I have this everyday activity. So I listen to podcasts when I walk my dog. I read on the toilet when because this is the only time where I have my, not always. Sometimes my daughter's visiting me also there, but yeah, I just read here and there. So I have like a background, something like a background noise of activity. And whenever I can manage, and nowadays with children, it's I can manage Sunday from 4 o'clock to like around about like 7 to 8 when my daughter wakes. Then I try to give myself a session of depth, and I try to focus on something. So I'm, for example, I'm a big fantasy nerd. So when I see dragon, I'm happy. It's like I'm really simple-minded in that, but I don't try to consume a lot of like different dragon images and books on that or PDFs. But I try to be active with it. So I try to do world building and go into depth, because then I get this necessary satisfaction that you get from depth, because then it's not exactly, or it's one component of meaning. Obviously, meaning is not purely about depth, because then like hyper focus or manically hyper focusing on a thing would give you meaning, which it doesn't. But this is how I try to balance it. So when
Mm.
I can resume to my old or to a more like relaxed schedule, I would dedicate a couple of sessions to my Zettelkasten, just purely for my on my Zettelkasten. Um, and then obviously it depends on how much work I have to do. A lot of my work happens in my Zettelkasten, so when I do research on like endurance training or stuff like that, then this also happens in my Zettelkasten. But like this, I can combine it, and I would say this would be a viable solution for you, meaning perhaps one session or two sessions per week. Obviously, something like Saturday morning when the children like, do their own thing or something like that. And try to make it longish, so longer than like 2 hours would be good, depending obviously on how it works. And then you focus on one thing that you actually want to commit and go deep. And most likely you would feel the benefits, and also feel not only from the productivity that would result out of it, but also from um, regarding life satisfaction.
Mm. Yeah. No, I hear you because yeah, I'm in the 90th percentile on both intellect and openness to experience.
Of
So
course, that's a curse.
um yeah, so so I can totally feel that I'm being dragged in all directions. Um and I mean I work as a scientist, so I'm being forced
Mm,
into depth at work. And there I guess I use something probably I never thought about it as a Zettelkasten,
mhm,
but from what you're saying, it is a bit similar because I mean I use files with somewhat larger topics
mhm,
and dump things there and work with it if I have to write something, right? Or I do coding, so I keep documentation for the thing. So it's more like a one file per topic,
mhm,
which don't usually require links in between them. But yeah, that there the scope is always so narrow that it doesn't. I never felt the need to make it into Zettelkasten.
mhm,
But my hobbies are very sprawling,
mhm,
so that's where I always felt like I need to keep some track of things. But clearly, Zettelkasten is maybe not, or like the way I've been capturing too much.
mhm.
I've been clearly capturing too much. And I think the capturing itself is not a problem, but accepting that not all of it can be processed
Yeah, yeah.
and that not all of it should be processed.
Yeah, especially if you use your Zettelkasten for your hobbies, then you want your Zettelkasten activity to be identical uh, um, to what you want to commit to. Because when let's say you consume, let's say you read a novel and there were like a couple of interesting things there. You don't want to have a complete summary of the novel just because it's nice to have it, because perhaps somebody won't ask you, and then it's nice to like just send the summary or something like that. You don't want to have complete analysis, or you don't want to capture everything or something like that. You just ask yourself, okay, this book served me well because it was a good book, let's assume. Um, so reading creates value for you. So what would create further or more value than reading another book? Because this is the opportunity cost, because you could spend the same time reading just another book. Just the very few highlights that like stand out to you. And then obviously you can judge a book by its value of commitment. So I read, for example, a book that had collections of stories of women that cheated on their husbands or partners. And I was looking forward to this book because it's a phenomenon that to me it's very odd and therefore interesting, but it was like really, really repetitive. So I processed the book, I think in less than 1 hour, because it was just like me flicking through the pages, and then I thought, okay, this is the same, the same, the same, because it was a lot of commentary also from the author, and the author was yeah, I didn't like how she what she wrote. And then I have the book, for example, Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb. I invested, I think, 100 hours of processing or something like that after the one reading. But the metric of productivity for me, and also like it's a good correlate to the joy, is how many ideas I can produce or reproduce within one session. It's not about how many notes I can process, not about how many books I can process in a period of time. It's about the intensity of the session, because this is the actual or the actual throughput of a session. And it's even better when I have a book that takes longer, because then the book is more valuable. So it's kind of like in reverse. I'm more productive when I need longer for a book, because it means the book was so good that I can use it much, much more than a bad book.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Or this could be, my wife is telling me I have to hurry for the food or for the meal now. But this could be a good, um, or this could be a goal that you could give you independent of the Zettelkasten method, meaning how or design a process or design a session in which you create depth in a way that depth is justifiable. Because when it's a hobby, the purpose of the hobby is, let's say, pleasurable stimulation. I mean, obviously there's like more noble hobbies and less noble hobbies. So if you would go to McDonald's, it's also stimulation, but let's call it a less noble hobby than I don't know, reading Dostoevsky or something like that. I hope this is non-controversial nowadays, but I would say, or this would be yeah, this positive stimulation is kind of like part of the deal. It's a necessary condition, but you can also you can build upon it. And I would say the depth that you create by deep processing will add to the meaning of your life. And in this is still independent from the Zettelkasten method. The Zettelkasten is just the best place in which the deep processing could happen.
One last question.
Yes.
What do you think makes Zettelkasten the right place to do it?
Um, Based on the definition, and nothing, because there are many thinking environments. But the best practices of the Zettelkasten method makes it, or the best practices of the Zettelkasten method makes the Zettelkasten method the let's say the nearest thing to proper thinking. So this is so I mean when I talk about the Zettelkasten method, I'm always meaning my incarnation of the Zettelkasten method, but
Sure.
um, I set up all the principles and the do's and don'ts, or discovered or like kept or whatever, or constructed with how I think knowledge works in my mind. So, for example, these the atomicity. It's atomicity is not just part of the Zettelkasten method. It's for good reason, because if you have an atomic node, or to create an atomic node, you need to be clear about the essence of an idea. So atomicity gives you access to the essence of the idea, or vice versa, however you want to put it. So access to the essence of the idea makes atomicity possible. Meaning, if you achieve or if you try to produce atomic notes, meaning the try, it's a goal. It's not that the given that you are starting with and then you just apply atomicity. But if you strive for the goal, then you also strive for the essence of the idea, which is part of good thinking, because when you are clear about the essence of the idea, you have a good grasp on it. And this is why the Zettelkasten method, I mean, it's the best thing out there. Obviously, there will be improvements. So it's the best out there until this point, in my opinion. In my honest opinion. I mean,
Mm.
also how I introduced the course. It's a little bit obnoxious, but to me it's important. I'm not like an influencer that tries to promote it, or a businessman or something like that. The Zettelkasten method is what I actually use for a wide variety of domains, or within a wide variety of domains, and everything has to work. So to be honest, so also it's not. Let's say I'm mentioning our app, but it's not like now exact advertising. If I would feel another app would be better for my needs, I would don't even use our own app. So it's not advertisement that I have use my own app or I mention it. It's just I think it's the most, or it's the proper app for this use, or for the Zettelkasten method, for example. And this is my background. It's I'm using this. I'm using it because I have to use it, because I'm always pushing myself to the limits of my cognitive abilities, and like I can't have like inferior methods, because then I couldn't do what I'm trying to do. And also it has to work with my clients. I'm trying to actually solve the problem. So uh, um, yeah, this is why I think my claim that the Zettelkasten method is such a good tool is justified, and not just justified by my enthusiasm or my let's say my hope to influence other people via social media or something like that.
No, that I yeah no I never expected that you were. No, I always find your blog post and anything you say on the Zettelkasten forum very insightful. So I was looking forward to hearing your insights about my situation. I have to say that I'm a little bit surprised because it's clear to me that the Zettelkasten method is not what I thought it was, and it's much more flexible
Mhm.
than I thought it was. And I guess there's just a lot of examples out there that are very cookie cutter.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and I feel like maybe what I have been converging towards is still within still within what could be called a Zettelkasten. Um, well, this was very interesting. Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So, no, I hope I won't get beaten by my wife because I'm a little bit late to our meal. But it's
Yeah,
fine.
I'm
I will.
sorry about that.
No, 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 no. I'm responsible. You don't have any problem. So we will reconnect via email, because this is a two-session thing, and um, have a very nice day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.